I feel so like what I said about modern Orthodox Jews, like part of me is I'm such an asshole, like this like second generation shit.
Not at all. I thought it was really interesting. I appreciated it. Because we live in a world in which it's like
Trauma porn.
trauma porn.
I don't like our culture. There's something about Jewish culture, just even the like growing up like hating Poland, you know what I mean? I mean, I understand it. And I don't know if my father would be happy that suddenly I'm spending all this time in Poland.
We're two Jews visiting Poland, two Jews with Polish ancestors who were survivors of the Holocaust. We're here in the famously beautiful city of Kraków, staying in the Jewish neighborhood of Kazimierz. There's a Jewish culture festival happening, and we're here to make a video. In the coming weeks, we'll share the travel vlog on this channel. But first, join us in our apartment rental 6 flights up for a cup of coffee and a long chat on the balcony overlooking the river. We're going to discuss what we think of being Jews in Poland, and we're not settling for easy narratives of good and bad people. I'm Frieda Vizel. I host this YouTube channel, which occasionally involves international visits like to Israel or Germany. My paternal grandfather was a Polish Jew who survived the war only because he was orphaned young and sent to live with relatives in Chust, which was Hungary during the Holocaust. The rest of his family didn't survive. This is Naomi Seidman, a historian, a professor at the University of Toronto. Naomi's father, Dr. Hill Seidman, was a famous Jewish intellectual who studied for his PhD at the University of Warsaw, Poland, and survived the Holocaust. During our stay, we'll spend many hours chatting on this balcony. Here, join us for a conversation.
Do you feel connected to Poland?
I feel so deeply connected to Poland in such a complicated way. My mother's from Romania, Transylvania, but my father was born in Galicia. These are all place names that no longer exist, but Poland was divided for many hundreds of years into among three different empires. And so my father came from Galicia, which was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. He was from a small town, which is now in Ukraine, but he lived in different places around what's now Poland, and he graduated from the University of Warsaw in 1940 with a PhD. And I had an aunt, I'm pretty sure, who went to the Beis Yaakov Seminary here in Krakow, who did not survive the war. And I never knew her, and I don't remember my father ever mentioning her exactly, so I didn't have a connection to her, but I've done a lot of research about this town because this is the town that the school system that I research was founded in.
What was your father's experience during the war?
My father was in Warsaw. He was in school when the war broke out, and he
was working on his PhD.
He was working on his PhD. And he was also working as an archivist for the Jewish community. And when the Germans occupied the city and created a ghetto, they wanted the archivist to remain in his job because they wanted records of Jews. So my father had a kind of protection for a while, but my father survived the Warsaw Ghetto. In 1943, he got out of the Warsaw Ghetto through a false passport, a false Allied passport. And instead of being taken to Treblinka, he was almost sent to Treblinka. He was on a train to Treblinka, and they opened up the door to put more people in, and my father rolled out and rolled under the train and ran away.
Wow.
So my father came very close to being sent to Treblinka. But then when he turned himself in with this Allied passport, he was sent to a prisoner of war camp instead of to a concentration camp. And he survived by hiding in that prisoner of war camp, which was in occupied France. So my father was hidden by a Russian woman and I think an American doctor inside the camp. And that's how he survived the war. And something like 12 Jews survived in hiding in that camp.
Did your dad speak Polish?
So my dad certainly spoke Polish in his youth, and he actually wrote 4 or 5 books in Polish. So I have these books, and I can't read them. And his dissertation was in Polish. He went to school in Polish, but I didn't hear him speak Polish very often because my mother didn't speak Polish, so they communicated in Yiddish. But at one point, my family got a Polish cleaning woman. For some reason, a lot of the cleaning women in New York are Polish.
Not anymore, they used to.
Oh, they used to be?
Yeah.
So for the first time in my life, I heard my father talking Polish. My mother was tell my father to say something to the cleaning woman, because obviously it was my mother that was in charge of the cleaning woman, but he could communicate, so he acted as a translator.
Wow, interesting. That's cool. Did he talk about Poland in a fond way?
No, absolutely not. My father was one of those survivors who, I mean, he hated Germany more than Poland, but he felt very bitter about Poland and whatever he experienced here. And when he was at the university, he talked about how there were ghetto benches and the Jews had to sit in separate benches. Or in some classes where there were no separate benches, they had to stand for the whole class. So there was real open discrimination that he experienced in the 30s. It was already pretty bad here. And that wasn't the Nazis, that was Polish anti-Semites who were influenced by Nazism, or had their own anti-Semitism. And he didn't like that people were going back to Poland. He didn't want to support the Polish economy. And I mean, one other thing that my father always said that I've been reverberating in my mind is that the earth of Poland is saturated with Jewish blood.
Yeah.
That's what he felt, that it's a cemetery. Every block is a cemetery.
That's what my mother said. She was talking to me recently about the rebuilding of synagogues in Eastern Europe. And she said, "Wo darf man dort gehen in die blitzverweichte Land?" You know, she couldn't understand it. Why are
Yes.
they rebuilding? And it's like, it's in the soil. It's in the soil. Blood
Right.
of like.
Right. Do you
innocent
step
people.
on your ancestors' blood?
Essentially. But I think
And I internalized that
Yeah, you
attitude. So
internalize.
when I came to Poland, it was like I was very, defensive.
Yeah, I think you internalize a sense of you internalize a sense almost like on guardness.
And I inherited those attitudes, and it was a very major shift in my life. I feel like this attitude of American Jews of stay away from the Poles is really problematic, and I don't feel that way anymore. I mean, I understand why other people might feel that way, but I don't feel that way anymore.
What was it like to be the daughter of a Holocaust survivor? Like, do you feel like in your personal life, do you feel like you inherited there's this talk about second generation trauma?
I hate that stuff. I'm sure it's true on some level, but I've always felt a little bit suspicious of it. My parents are Holocaust survivors, and I am not. There's a huge difference. I was born into a society where the Holocaust had a kind of status that I've, in some ways benefited from, if you know what I mean. And my parents didn't, my father was sad and I saw him cry and I knew about the Holocaust, but I just think there's a huge difference. And maybe I'll tell this story about I've never gone to a meeting of children of Holocaust survivors or identified myself that way in any kind of formal way, except once I tried to do it. I was in college and I saw an advertisement in the newspaper, and I thought the advertisement said it was for a meeting of children of Holocaust survivors. And I went to the meeting. It was in the village in a nice apartment building, and I walk into the meeting and I somehow don't get a Jewish vibe. I'm like, these people are not Jewish. And I was confused, what am I doing here? I'm not sensing. And then they went around in a circle, and I realized from people introducing themselves that they weren't children of Holocaust survivors. There were people who believed themselves to be reincarnations of people who were killed in the Holocaust.
Did you sign up for the wrong?
I signed up for the wrong thing, and they got to me, and I said, well, I'm sorry, I misread the advertisement. I'm the child of Holocaust survivors. And the woman who was leading it said, you have to go. It's not for you. And I said, well, just because I'm the child of Holocaust survivors doesn't mean that I'm not also a reincarnation. And so
Which you are for the purpose of staying at this.
I said, maybe I am too. How do you know? She kneels in front of me, she looks in my eyes, and she says, you're not. And as soon as she said that, I was like, she's right, I'm not. And I got my coat, and I started to leave. And as I'm at the door, my face was bright red. And as I'm at the door, I said, are all of you reincarnations of victims of the Holocaust, or are some of you reincarnations of perpetrators? And then I walked out.
Essentially, there's a point system.
A point system.
Or there's a system of who's been a victim and
Yes.
deserves therefore to be honored.
I am a victim.
And you're not at all.
I do not want to play that. I didn't survive the Holocaust. I wasn't reincarnated as a victim of the Holocaust.
As far as you know.
No, I believe not. It didn't happen to me. And I want to insist on that. And not only that, but in the culture in which I was raised, in some ways I've gotten points at various places. And I've just had a real resistance to I'm the child of a second generation. And I don't want to put down anybody else's experience. I don't want to get into that thing where I talk about myself and I seem to be criticizing everybody else, even though maybe in my mind I am. And maybe there's something neurotic about not wanting to take on whatever kind of status there may be. I feel so like I'm such an asshole, like this second generation shit.
Not at all. I thought it was really interesting. I appreciated it because we live in a world in which it's like
trauma porn.
Trauma porn. Yeah.
I don't like our culture. There's something about Jewish culture. Just even the growing up hating Poland, you know what I mean? I understand it. And I don't know if my father would be happy that suddenly I'm spending all this time in Poland.
I'll tell you what it is. It's like, on the one hand, victim culture can become something where it's status you cash in, and it becomes so opportunistic that it's terrible, but it can't be called out because who's going to criticize victims? On the other hand, sometimes people who are genuine victims have a hard time accepting that they're broken in some ways.
I'm definitely broken in some ways.
I do think that to be completely honest, I think I'm carrying brokenness because of my ancestral brokenness. I do think so.
It fucks you up.
It fucks you up.
And my parents didn't want me to know about the Holocaust. They would take me out of school when it was being discussed. I don't know if you were raised that way.
No, not at all.
Not at all?
Not at all.
Did your parents want you to know about the Holocaust?
It was discussed. It was discussed at all times. It was not an intentional education at all. It was more like, Zaidi, tell that story again. You know how you have a
stories.
Cache of stories. It's like that cache. Is it cache or cache?
So your grandfather was a Holocaust survivor?
Yeah, my grandparents were Holocaust survivors, and I wouldn't
it's
say
a cache of stories.
I wouldn't say it was status as much as when you have a good story and you can tell it again and everyone will appreciate it. So we were very cognizant, I would say, of the value of stories. I grew up with a good story, and our grandparents had good stories. So it was the adults would prompt them, tell the story.
Exactly.
Of the
5 Holocaust stories. That's what I grew up with.
And you'd hear them over and over.
Over and over, the same ones.
Yeah.
But there were also things that my mother would start to say and then she couldn't say it. like horrible things she witnessed, and she would like start to say it and she couldn't say it. Or my father would say the children in the ghetto, and then they couldn't say it.
Yeah.
It was very, but I know exactly what you mean by the stories, like
Yeah.
5 years and you get 5 stories.
Yeah. And, you know, for us, it wasn't status. I don't think when I grew up there was a status involved. I think when I started to leave the Hasidic community, I was very surprised by how much I heard Deborah Feldman talking about the Holocaust, because I didn't feel like the Holocaust had really touched me much. But I think in hindsight, I think a part of what came with time was to begin to appreciate the kind of unusualness of the air we breathed, which was so much the Holocaust. For instance, September 11, I was the 11th grade. Everyone thought so certainly that we were all going to be targeted, and it had a lot to do with the amount of stories we had heard about being rounded up, and it made it very, very real.
Yeah.
And I think I really appreciate your honesty. To be honest, I'm just telling you this, I really appreciate your honesty about being second generation and not liking it, because I really like that you're calling out like that there is like a social benefit to these stories. On the other hand, there's a reason for these social benefits, similar to like cancer survivors have these stories, and some people will lean into it a lot, and other people will be like, let me live my life.
Yeah, I don't think there's any benefits anymore.
To cancer.
No, I don't think there's any benefits to being like, to parading your connection to the Holocaust. I think that's over.
I see.
The Holocaust is mostly over.
Yeah.
It's like old news. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't think that, for 50 years, the world felt guilty. And I don't think they do anymore. And in some ways, that's a shame, and they should, and it's been 80 years now. But you know, there are other, what's happening in Israel, I mean, those kinds of things. I think people don't feel, there isn't the same taboo around anti-Semitism.
Yeah. It's very interesting, because I didn't grow up with a sense of anti-Semitism. I didn't know what anti-Semitism
Right,
was.
I never experienced it.
I never experienced
I heard of it, but I didn't even know what it was about.
I didn't know what it was about.
I didn't know that Jews were supposed to be rich,
I know.
because we didn't have any money.
I know. How did I find out? I gave a tour. I had a German on my tour, and there was a Jewish cash register in a toy shop window. So it was like olive Beis and whatever. It was Jewish themed for Yiddish-speaking children.
Because non-Jews aren't interested in money.
But this German said, "Isn't it anti-Semitic?" And I had a hard time understanding what would be. You know, it took me some mental gymnastics to understand.
Yes.
Associating Jews with money was to
Right.
him associating Jews with being grabby, taking, thievery.
Right. Or even just being like merchants, as opposed to like peasants. Right, that's the economic stereotype, that Jews are just, they deal in money, which is true. That was historically,
Yeah, true.
That's why-
what the Jews were able to do.
yeah.
And once you start to learn about it, when I come to a place like Poland, I feel like there are these collective ideas about Jews, similar to what you'll see in America with like collective ideas about certain races.
Right, stereotypes about Jews. And Jews are just associated with money. And it's awkward now because who comes here is American Jews with money.
Yeah.
I mean, Poland is not the country it was 20 years ago. I mean, when it basically exported labor to...
Yeah, you can't even get Polish Goites anymore.
Exactly.
And on that note, how do you feel about Polish anti-Semitism?
Well, I don't like it. I mean, how do I feel about
What is your impression is the
Oh,
prevalence?
is Polish anti-Semitic? I mean, I haven't had a lot of experience with Poles. I've already told you that I've met these Poles that I think of as great friends of the Jews. I've had people yell anti-Semitic things at me in Poland. I think in Poland, a lot of it has to do with there are American Jews that come back to Poland, and Poland is a poor country compared to the United States. And this idea of the rich Americans that come through, I think that some of the anti-Semitism must have something to do with that. I think Poles are also afraid that American Jews are going to come and reclaim their property. And then there's also this weird like middle case where like if you go to the market square, you see that there's a tourist industry around images of Jews, and some of the images of Jews register as anti-Semitic. Like they sell piggy banks with the chassid like holding a penny, pinching a penny, and they don't perceive this as anti-Semitic. And if you talk to them, I had actually did have a Polish non-Jewish friend, Catholic friend, very sophisticated, feminist, leftist. And when I said something about this piggy bank, a Jewish piggy bank, she's like, oh, no, it's not anti-Semitic, it's good luck. And I'm like, I think I'm allowed to say what's anti-Semitic. Anyway, she just didn't see eye to eye with me on this. And I just let it go. She was being super nice to me, but she just did not perceive it as anti-Semitic. So and then Poles also feel as if they're blamed for the Holocaust. And certainly there are things that Poles did. I mean, there were pogroms after the war. In 1945, there was a pogrom in the shtetl of Kielce, where Jews were killed after the Holocaust. So it's not just the Nazis, but the Polish society is extremely defensive about accusations of anti-Semitism, and sometimes there's a backlash against that. There are Jews living in Poland today, and they don't like the American Jewish stereotype of all Poles are anti-Semitic. They want their experience to be known, that they live as friends and neighbors of Poles, most of whom are Catholic. And there are a lot of Poles on the left who see the multicultural Poland of the interwar period, when there were not just Jews, but also Germans and White Russians and etc. They see that as a kind of golden age of Polish multiculturalism, and they miss the Jews. The first time I came to Poland, and I had this strange experience. I went to the Jewish cemetery in Warsaw. It's an amazing cemetery. If you have time, you should go visit. It's more or less intact. Some of these cemeteries survived, and it was beautiful, full of art. And there were all these students cleaning the cemetery and recording the names of the people who were there, spending their weekend working in the cemetery. And I asked who these people were, and our guide said they're students from Warsaw University studying Jewish history. And I said, are they Jewish? And she said no. And I think that was the first thing I saw, and that so impressed me. And then as it happened, after that trip, I went right to Israel, and I went to a Palestinian town that had been abandoned, and there were all these like sort of Israeli hippies that were abandoned. They were expelled from there in 1948, and hippies were just using it as a place to get stoned. And there was I didn't see any Jewish equivalent to these Poles. And I thought, who's taking care of Palestinian history? Who's remembering these towns? Obviously this is a conflict that's ongoing, but in Poland, there's ongoing political issues. So there's still a Polish right wing that isn't happy that American Jews come here and want to talk about the Holocaust and insist that it was all about the Germans, and it's against the law to say a Polish concentration camp. Just so you know, you have to say a German concentration camp in Poland, which is absolutely correct. But so there's still tensions around Poland and the Holocaust and coming to terms with the past, but there are so many Poles that have devoted themselves to Jewish history. And I think coming here and appreciating their efforts is really important. And I'm not my father, I'm not a Holocaust survivor, and I'm a historian, and these are, people of my generation and my age who are heroes. And they've really, I'm thinking about people like Janusz Makuch, who, has been putting on this festival for, I think this is the 34th year, which is happening right now. It's a little smaller than usual because All the Israeli performers are stuck, they can't fly in, so the whole festival has kind of contracted, and it already started to contract with COVID, but it's still amazing, and it's still, to me, it's one of the most interesting things in the Jewish world today. I don't just mean in the Jewish world of festivals, I just mean in the Jewish world. I think it's so interesting. It started during the Soviet era, when really, you know, the memory of the Jews that used to live here was kind of, it was an unmentionable. And he started this festival underground with no support. Now it's supported by, you know, American Jewish philanthropists, but he did it on his own. And then there are other people that we've met who revived Jewish culture in Poland purely from their own, I mean, they were behind the Iron Curtain, just from their own resources. They read, so in America, we take it for granted. We have freedom of religion. We have, you know, it's not so, in some ways, it's being Jewish is so meaningful in Poland. And also just, you know, the Polish, mostly Catholics, that do Jewish studies here, or that clean the cemeteries, or that study Yiddish, or teach Yiddish, or do tours like we're gonna get today. It's very moving to me, and people, I think American Jews are always really confused by this. They're like, why don't you, if you feel so much about being Jewish, about Jews, then why don't you convert to Judaism and become a Jew? And they're like, no, we're not Jews, and we don't pretend to be. But this is our country, and for 1,000 years, Jews lived here. And, you know, we want to remember it as part of our own heritage, too. So I walk down the street in Krakow, and it's as if I'm walking in different times. Like, I'm here today, and I'm so aware of the city in the interwar period because I've studied it, I've researched it, I read about it, I've immersed myself in it. I've seen photos of it. I have so many photos of the girls sitting by the banks of the river that's right over our balcony. And I also, my mother went to a different Beis Yaakov seminary in Chernovitz, which is now in Ukraine. And I've heard her talk about how every afternoon they went for a walk in the city, and they would look for, they came from small towns, so for them the city was like, what kind of interesting fruit can we get? And they loved the city, and that was true here too. These were small town girls coming to the big city, to seminary, to learn to be teachers. And I like, when I walk through the streets of Krakow, I recognize the names of streets. And to do historical research and read the Yiddish press is one thing, but then to walk down the street and to hear the bells ringing and to understand what it means to be a Jew in a Catholic city it's very close to the surface for me here. There are things that you can get only from being in the place.
Like what?
Like understanding, so I'll give you one example. When I was a Beis Yaakov student in Beis Yaakov of Borough Park, we had a song about the early years of Beis Yaakov, which started, in a little town in Poland, not so many years ago, lived the mother of Beis Yaakov, may her memory always glow. A little town in Poland. This place.
Krakow?
Krakow. I was like, oh my God, it was not a little town. We have these memories of, like, as if everyone lived in a black and white photograph or a sepia-toned photograph. Instead, it's this bustling cosmopolitan city. And I'm thinking of, what's another example? I remember when I heard about the Chernobyl nuclear reactor disaster, which you maybe weren't born for. And I was like, Chernobyl? That's a shtetl. And they have a nuclear reactor there? I mean, we had a shtibel, like a little Hasidic prayer house called the Chernobyler, that we used to go to. So to understand that these places didn't stop in time when Jews left, and I'm taking the train here, and it's like one shtetl after another, like Shabin or Katowice, and all these names are familiar to me. So Poland is like the familiar and the unfamiliar at the same time,
Yeah.
which Freud says is the contents of our unconscious. So Poland is the contents of my unconscious.
Wow, this
Past
is
that lives in me.
yeah. That is true. That it is the past that lives in you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Well, shall we go?
You're the boss.
Let's go see Poland.